Welcome to Survivor Angels, Lightcast Edition. There's something I want to start this season with that most people have experienced. But almost no one has been taught how to understand in a way that actually feels accurate. It's that moment where everything looks fine, and yet something in you doesn't settle. I've had this happen in the most ordinary situations. Walking into a space that looks completely normal. Sitting in conversations that sound completely fine. Even making decisions that, on paper, make perfect sense. And still feeling this quiet, persistent sense that something isn't fully right. Not wrong in a dramatic way. Not urgent. Just off. And for a long time, I did what most people do. I explained it away. I told myself I was overthinking. I'm a knower, or being too sensitive. I'm a feeler. Or reading something into it that just simply wasn't there. Because if you can't explain a feeling, the easiest thing to do is dismiss it, right? But over time, I started to notice something that changed everything, absolutely everything for me. And that feeling wasn't random. It was consistent. It was specific. And more often than not, it was right. What I've come to understand and what I want to open this entire season with is that your earliest awareness of truth rarely shows up as a thought. It shows up as a feeling that you don't yet have language for. You see, before your mind organizes anything, and before you can explain or even justify what you're noticing, your system has already registered something. Your body feels it, your energy responds to it, and there's this ever so subtle shift that happens internally. That shift is information. The problem is, we've been taught to trust what we can explain more than what we can feel. So there's this gap that gets created between what we know on a deeper level and what we allow ourselves to acknowledge. And most people live in that gap without even realizing it. For me, this has shown up in really simple ways. I said earlier, walking into a room and immediately feeling like something changed, even though nothing obvious happened. Being in a conversation where everything's going along just fine, everything sounded fine, but something underneath it felt slightly tense or even inconsistent. Saying yes to something that made sense logically. How many times do we do that? Saying yes to something that made sense logically, but feeling a quiet resistance that didn't go away afterward. So the more I started paying attention, the more I realized that those moments weren't isolated. They were signals, not loud ones, not dramatic ones, but very clear once I stopped trying to override them. Control, control, control. Stop overriding them. That's what I did. You know, that feeling of something being off, it isn't just confusion. Sometimes it's not confusion at all. Sometimes it's not even a little bit, or maybe it is a little bit confusion. But what it really is it's awareness. Just not the kind you've been taught to recognize. Your system is constantly reading information that your mind doesn't immediately process. Our mind's full of stuff. It can't do everything right now. even though we live in a world that wants everything right now. But it's picking up on tone, and it's picking up on intention, and it's picking up on coherence and subtle inconsistencies in ways that don't rely on language. So when something doesn't match, when there's that disconnect between what's being presented and what's actually there, you feel it before you understand it. And that's where most people lose trust. Remember, I finished the end of last season talking about self-trust? It doesn't go away here. We're still talking about it because it's crucial. And because if you can't explain it, it feels unreliable. But in reality, it's often the most honest signal that you have. I know you're all waiting, right? Where do angels begin to enter this experience? Because you know I'm always going to talk about angels because they're always with us. They're always with me. They're always with you. Because there's another layer to this that I didn't fully understand at first. But it became undeniable the more I paid attention. There are moments when that awareness feels more precise. There are moments when that awareness feels more precise. Not louder, not overwhelming, but clearer, almost as if something is gently drawing your attention to exactly what matters. Not the big, loud stuff, the more subtle, clearer pieces. And this is where, in my experience, the presence of angels begins to be felt. Not as something separate from you, not as a voice interrupting your thoughts, screaming in your head, no, 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 go, 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 whatever, but as an intelligence that works within your awareness, helping it come into sharper focus. I've come to understand that angels don't replace your perception, they refine it. They're constantly smoothing out those rough edges and bumps. They don't tell you what to think or what to do. They help you notice what is already true, especially in moments where you might otherwise override it. So that feeling of something being off is not just your awareness. It's often your awareness being supported, your awareness being steadied and clarified in a way that is incredibly subtle, but very real. So why do we override it? Even with that support, most of us have learned to override these signals. We trust what we can explain, we trust what looks right, and we trust what makes sense to other people. And slowly we start trusting that more than we trust ourselves. But every time you override that initial awareness, you create a small disconnect. People have talked about that gut feeling for generations, that initial awareness, that gut feeling, not from the world, but from your own ability to recognize what's true for you. Because the angels are talking to you. And over time, that disconnect adds up. What changed for me when I started listening wasn't that I suddenly had all the answers. It was that I stopped needing them immediately. I could take that pause. I could sit with it. And instead of asking, why do I feel this? I started asking, what am I noticing? That one shift created space. Space to stay with the feeling instead of just simply dismissing it. space to let the clarity unfold instead of forcing it, and space to recognize that awareness comes first and understanding follows. And you know what? The more I did that, the more consistent everything became. Because it's about deeper truth, about alignment. Alignment isn't something you achieve once and then hold on to, grab onto, latch onto it. Rather, it's something you recognize moment by moment through your response to what you're experiencing. It's the difference between something that feels open versus something that suddenly pulls you out of yourself. And that off feeling is often your first indication that something isn't matching. That's not lining up, not matching up, but not necessarily wrong, but not fully true for you. Got to learn how to work with it. When something feels off, I don't rush to figure it out anymore. I pause. I take that pause just long enough to acknowledge it. Hey, hoo-hoo, okay, I got it. Okay? I'll literally think something here isn't aligned. Something is off. And then I stay aware. Not by forcing a decision. I don't analyze it immediately. I let the awareness stay active. I sit with it. Because more often than not, what starts as that subtle feeling becomes clearer simply because I didn't shut it down. I took the pause and I sat with it. There is more information available to you in any given moment than your mind can process. Flying through there at the speed of light, just whipping through our brain cells. And some of it arrives as thought, some of it arrives as emotion, and some of it arrives as something quieter, something that doesn't demand your attention, but waits for it. That quiet sense of something being off is not something to dismiss. Don't be afraid of it. Lean into it with the pause and sitting with it because it's the beginning of clarity. And oftentimes it's not something you're navigating alone. It's something that is being gently illuminated for you in ways you're only just beginning to recognize. There are things that you've been sensing your entire life, and learning to trust them may be the moment everything begins to align within you and with the guidance that's been walking beside you all along. Activate your angels.